John, college football realignment, TV is the driving force. Let's talk about what just happened and what's next.
And Andrew, I have a personal message for Orioles play-by-player Kevin Brown. Blink twice if you can hear us.
They had lost their last 15 series here at Tropicana Field. You have to go back to when our now colleague Brad Brock picked up the win in the series finale June 25th, 2017, the last time the Orioles won a series here at St. Pete.
And we're back. The Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. If you like this pod, you can like it, you can give us a comment, and you can follow. John, let's get right to it. Who's up and who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
Andrew, let me lead us off. My who's up, despite the U.S. women's national team losing in the knockout round of the World Cup, I'm going to give it to Carli Lloyd, because if you were watching or listening to Carli Lloyd, you were not at all surprised to see the women's team lose in the knockout round, and you weren't surprised to see the amount of troubles that they had scoring during this tournament. Carli Lloyd was exactly what Fox wanted when they hired her. She's outspoken. She was new, so a little bit of rust, a little rough around the edges, but she endured a lot of criticism because she was very, extremely tough on her former team. And as a viewer, you don't want to see unfair shots. You do want to hear their unvarnished opinions, and I think Carli Lloyd was somebody who gave that during the entire tournament.
John, my who's up, Richard Sherman. He's going to join Skip Bayless on Undisputed on FS1. No matter what you think of those shows, they do have an impact. And now if you look at Sherman's portfolio, he's on Amazon's Thursday Night Football, which was pretty well received in terms of their pregame and halftime and postgame show. Now he'll have a big voice with Bayless on FS1. He's not fully replacing Shannon Sharpe. He'll do, I reported the other day, 50 to 100 shows, mostly during the NFL. You can expect them mostly to be on Mondays and Tuesdays after, big Sunday NFL action, but going at it with Bayless. Sherman, I don't think we saw they've had some run-ins in the past. They had a big meeting last month at some point in Beverly Hills and for 2 hours, and I was told it went well. So he'll be joining Bayless. They also like Keyshawn Johnson. It's going to be a lot of people joining the debate club here, but Sherman gets the big role in terms of being probably on Mondays, Tuesdays, maybe even appearing sometimes via remote, from Amazon's studios, possibly when they're in market for every Thursday night game, which seems like could be a plus for Amazon to get even more publicity on FS1 during those days. So my who's up, Richard Sherman.
All right, I'm going to lead us off with a who's down, and the biggest shocker of the day, my who's down has nothing to do with my Baltimore Orioles or Kevin Brown. My who's down is Roger Goodell and Adam Silver, who I semi-seriously believe are responsible for the death of the Pac-12. And that's because Roger Goodell oversaw $110 billion worth of rights deals out of the TV networks. You had ESPN, Fox, CBS, NBC, Amazon paying about $5 billion more for NFL rights. And that money has to come from somewhere. It's not like they got added inventory from the NFL. It's still the same games that they're going to have to sell advertising against. And advertisers aren't going to foot that bill. And you look at what's happening with ESPN and the broadcast networks for that matter, their distribution is going down. So the money that they're getting from cable operators, from satellite distributors, that's going down as well. That NFL deal, we all worried that it was going to take a lot of money out of the market. It really took the money out of the market. And I threw Adam Silver in there as well, because you have NBC, CBS, Amazon. You have these companies that want to bid on NBA programming when their deal comes up. And they're trying to save their pennies because they know that's going to be a big deal as well. So why did the Pac-12 not get the media money that it was expecting? It has a lot to do with the NFL deal that happened and with the NBA deal that's about to happen.
My who's down is John Ourand.
What?
What is going on with your Orioles? Anybody who listens to this podcast knows you're having a great year with how well the Orioles are doing. They're on pace to win 100 games. They're in first place, but they're an utter embarrassment, John. I hold you accountable. Let's give credit where credit's due. Matt Jurgensen from Baltimore Sports Pub and then Awful Announcing had the story in terms of Kevin Brown being off the air for a couple of weeks. John, it's an embarrassment. So we're going to talk about it later in the topics, but let's just go through it here. This is what Kevin Brown said on Masson. This is most of it, which got kicked off the air for a couple of weeks by John Angelos, who's really the who's down, John Angelos, by John Angelos and Masson and the Orioles for this comment, which isn't even, it's just a statement of fact. There's a graphic involved, and then we're going to go through all the announcers who came to Kevin Brown's defense. Here's Kevin Brown, first Baltimore Orioles play-by-player on TV.
It's been a minute. The Orioles split a two-gamer with the Rays in June. They had lost their last 15 series here at Tropicana Field. You have to go back to when our now colleague Brad Brock picked up the win in the series finale June 25th. 2017, the last time the Orioles won a series here at St. Pete. Already got 3-2 at the Trop this year after winning 3 of 18 the previous 3 years combined. It is a stark difference, Ben, and it is not a bad Rays team. It's not like all of a sudden the Rays became slouches in the American League East. They've led this division every day but now 2, and the Orioles once again are back alone in first place.
Okay, reacting to the suspension, Gary Cohn on SNY.
During a recent game at Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Kevin, during his opening, talked about how the Orioles had trouble winning in the past at Tropicana Field, but that they were doing better this year. That was really all he said. And for that, the Baltimore Orioles management decided to suspend Kevin Brown. Let me just say one thing to Baltimore Orioles management. You draped yourself in humiliation when you fired John Miller, and you're doing it again. And if you don't want Kevin Brown, there are 29 other teams who do. It's a horrendous decision by the Orioles. I don't know what they were thinking, but they've gotten exactly the reaction that they deserve. And it's just a shame because the Orioles are playing so well, and now they've diverted attention from that and now made themselves a laughing stock.
All right, here's Michael K. on Yes.
They should be ashamed of themselves because not only was what Kevin said in the Oriole notes that night, but it was on a graphic, which means that it was planned. So if you're going to be so thin-skinned to suspend Kevin Brown, then you have to suspend the entire Oriole truck, the producer, director, graphics. You have to suspend all of them because they're all complicit in this. And if John Angelos, the owner of the Orioles, didn't like that, then he's thin-skinned, he's unreasonable, and he should actually get a call from Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, because it's unconscionable that you would actually suspend a really good broadcaster for no reason whatsoever. He didn't do anything wrong.
And let's finish it off with Dave O'Brien on Nesson.
Somebody didn't like the facts very much, and that's a fiasco.
John, an utter embarrassment for the Orioles. I was tempted to tweet out, well, the Orioles have a point, as a joke. As a joke. Nobody would have gotten it, maybe. So I didn't do it. But, like, there is no other side. I always try to look at everything and say, all right, what's the other side? What don't we know? There is no other side. The story was even picked up by the cable networks like CNN and MSNBC. The Orioles, what are they doing? They're the feel-good story of the year. I think John Angelos lives in his own reality to think that's criticism. I just think they're trying to just have a Pravda approach to things. But an utter embarrassment for John Ourand. And you, my friend, are my who's down.
We are going to talk about this in the topics, and I'm going to try to give you the team's perspective. I'm going to try, okay?
There is no team perspective, but you can wait for that. All right, let's move to the topics. And this has been a topic we are approaching. Next week's our 100th show. We've talked about this topic a lot. The Big 12, the Pac-12, before that, the Big 10, and what's going on in college football with realignment. And we all know that, which has been good for this pod, especially that.
Andrew, we've gotten some grief from people saying, oh, wait, why do you talk about the Pac-12 so much? This is why we were.
Yeah, we saw the hurricane coming. We've been reporting on it. That's why it's kind of weird when you see some of the heads of these universities saying we were blindsided that these deals didn't come to fruition with any of the networks. So the Pac-12 is now the Pac-4. John, how did we get here?
We got here about a year ago. ESPN and Fox and I believe Amazon as well were interested in cutting a deal, and so they were interested in a deal that is essentially what the Big 12 got. It was going to be a little bit more maybe than the Big 12 ended up signing, and the university presidents at the Pac-12, they had just gone through a how many years of Larry Scott. They didn't trust the home office. They have the Pac-12 has a certain arrogance about themselves, and they felt like we needed to be part. The Pac-12 needed to be part of the SEC money or the Big Ten money. And so when they saw the money that they were going to get for that TV deal, they rejected it out of hand because they know, no, we need to be up. This is where you were the first one to say they were hundreds of millions of dollars apart, and they were.
Well, let me just say, and this, you're saying that when they had this offer, this is after the Big 12 deal is already done? You think they could have had an offer?
No. This was before. This was
okay,
before.
That's what I thought. Okay, that's what I had too. Before the Big 12 deal, before the Big 12 made the great move to step in front of the line and get a deal done, even though they weren't up for a couple more seasons, they stepped in line. The Pac-12 let that pass. And then they were hundreds of millions of dollars apart with ESPN and then Fox. And then as it moved on, Amazon went out of the picture. We've kind of known for a long time. I don't like to report anything is like someone's done because things change, but I've known for a long while that Amazon was out. We'd said unlikely a lot, but they were been out for a long time.
Once Brett Yormark went over, and this is why Brett Yormark, in terms of executive of the year, like he came over, he knew that the networks were talking to the Pac-12. He knew that they were far apart, and like he ended up doing a deal that, again, this is going back to my who's down, Goodell and Silver. It took money out of the market, and all of a sudden there just wasn't money there for the Pac-12. And so 2 years ago, if you had told me the Big 12 versus a Pac-12, of course the Pac-12 was going to last longer than the Big 12. But the Big 12 did the TV deal. There was some thought it was risky when they did it, because there was some thought if you wait, then the deal's going to get better, because that's what's happened in the TV business for the past 2 decades pretty much. And so the Pac-12 had no money coming from or not really good money coming from the TV companies. You had streamers like Amazon and like Apple, which had been paying a lot for sports rights. But all of a sudden, Wall Street looked at the streaming companies and said, you're spending too much on content. We need you to focus on profits. All the streaming companies sort of step back from making these big payouts. So, Amazon was out, and Apple did a deal that a lot of the university presidents took a look at and said, like, that's not a good deal. We'd sooner go to the Big 12 or whatever, the ACC potentially, than do that deal.
John, before we get to the Apple portion of it, you hit on something that I think is the most important thing when you talk about the misread by the Pac-12 in terms of the market and what George Kliavkoff, their commissioner, what they got wrong. And that was, instead of saying this is the marketplace in terms of what we should get, we're working against the $1 billion a year that the Big Ten just got from Fox, NBC, and CBS. Instead, it was all this money drained out, and these networks now feel as if they don't have money just to spend, which you've hit on a lot over the course of the podcast of when we've talked about this. And that was the big misread, and that was the great read by the Big 12 and Brett Yormark and his advisors in terms of stepping in front of the Pac-12 and realizing that. And you can go back to Larry Scott, and we will a little bit. Let's hit on that actually. Let's go before we get to Apple. Let's hit on how we got here. First off, give me your top 3 culprits for why we're here and why the Pac-12 may not exist. I mean, we're taping this on Tuesday, comes out Wednesday. Things are moving possibly in terms of Stanford and Cal possibly going to the ACC. We don't know where that will go in terms of the near term, but the conference might not exist. John, we've been fortunate for the podcast, not as fortunate for the Pac-12, although maybe if they'd listened to the podcast, they wouldn't have been as surprised. And perhaps some of them did. I think we got some feedback, so I do think they listened, and thanks for listening to all of them. But when you look at the top 3 culprits, especially from a media perspective, because that's what's driving this, is TV has been driving this. When you look at going back in terms of how we got here, because what was it, 2012, the Pac-12 signed the richest deal for any conference when they inked with Fox and ESPN, and they started the Pac-12 network, which the Pac-12 network kind of didn't work out, which is an understatement. And so when you look at it, your top 3 culprits for how we got here.
Yeah, and it's important that you said a media perspective. I mean, not only are we the sports media podcast, but it is a media money that's driving this. And I wish I could answer this with more specificity, but I'm going to lump my number one culprit. I like how we're not saying villain. Our number one culprit is just the group of university presidents. There was a deal to be had, and they were the ones who rejected it. The deal to be had with ESPN and with Fox early on, before the Big 12 ended up doing their deal. Not only did they reject it, but they would negotiate in the press, and they would give false deadlines, and they would talk about money, and they did everything that media executives don't do during negotiations. The university presidents did, and they had an overinflated view of the Pac-12 standing in the college marketplace. They were caught completely off guard by these overwhelming trends that are happening in the media business. If there's one culprit, it is the group of university presidents right there.
Okay, and then number 2, I think on your list, because I had access to the rundown, was Larry Scott, the former commissioner, who, the big mistake, right, when you look at it from a media perspective, was when they went to the Pac-12 network and they did it without a partner. The Big Ten is partnered with Fox. That's helped them out a lot in terms. It's great for Fox. I mean, it's even better for Fox than probably is for the Big Ten. But that partnership helps them out a lot. SEC is aligned with ESPN, helps them out a lot. Pac-12 decided to do their network by themselves. Had no leverage in trying to get some carriage with the cable companies. That was a major issue, and I think that's a large reason why they're there, because I said this a number of times. Once you fall behind in the TV game, it's hard to come back. The Big 12 has made a tremendous comeback, not really even a comeback, but just made great reads in terms of where to go. The Pac-12, and we'll get into the Apple deal in a moment, or the Apple offer. Even if they'd done the Apple offer, I think it was inevitable that the Pac-12 was going to break up, or teams were going to leave, because it likely wouldn't be successful. Even if it was financially successful, it would not likely be successful in terms of what the other conferences, where they were going. And so we'll get that in a moment. But Larry Scott, where does he fit in here?
Yeah, I have him at number 2 for all of the reasons that you outlined. And I also want to go back, because you mentioned the deal that they did in 2012, where they were it was the richest deal a college conference did. That deal ended up being a disaster for the Pac-12. Back then, they had a handshake agreement with NBC, and that was back when Dick Ebersol was running it. And NBC wanted to have Pac-12 programming, and it would have Notre Dame football leading into it, and it was going to be a big part of NBC's schedule. Well, Fox and ESPN did not want to give NBC any kind of foothold in it. What ended up happening was Larry Scott reneged on the deal with NBC. He ended up doing the deal with Fox and ESPN, and now when that deal comes up with everything with the network that you talked about as well, like, where do you think they would be right now if they had a nice primetime slot on NBC, and NBC actually invested in it and
100%.
marketed it, and that, like, they would be fine right there. I think that was another colossal misstep by Larry Scott right there. He also ran the conference in such a way that he didn't have a lot of support among the athletic directors. It created the situation where number 3 on my list, which is the current commissioner, George Kliavkoff, came in, and he's sort of the sitting commissioner. He came into just an awful situation and just wasn't able to rectify it. We saw firsthand how hard it was to get all of the athletic directors and all the college presidents all to sing from the same hymnal, so to speak. And that's the role of the commissioner, is to try to wrangle them. Imagine Jim Delaney, the former commissioner at the Big Ten. That was what he was great at. That's what Sankey at the SEC is great at. He sort of gets everybody in line. So number 3 on my list is Kliavkoff, just because he wasn't able to, there are all these different factions, and that's sort of what we're seeing here with the split up.
Okay, now I got a little one of these deep thought moments. Maybe I can get some Jack Handy music underneath me.
Deep thoughts.
Old school people will remember that. But I think one of the hard things in business and in life is sometimes when you long for yesterday and you need to be thinking about tomorrow. I mean, I went deep there, John. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think the Pac-12 was so lost in, what they were, and, they lost UCLA and USC. And at that point, you have to realize it's a different world. You just lost the LA market. You could argue 2 of your 2 most marketable teams. And I know they've been good, they've been bad, but they're still LA, second biggest market in the country. And that's important to TV. And so when that happened, that's when they needed to readjust and say, our expectations have to change. We can keep the conference together. So now let me bring it to Apple, okay? And I wrote this in my newsletter, New York Post Sports Plus, every Monday newsletter plus, is that I do think this says something about Apple TV Plus, okay? They made an offer that was good enough to refuse. Now, Apple has the money where they could have made it so it was $30 million a team. Now, I understand, and I don't know this firsthand, but from reporters I respect, like Jason Shear, who covers Arizona, and others who've said that they didn't want, especially Arizona, didn't want only streaming. So maybe there's no deal ever to do. But at least if you'd gotten to 30 million guaranteed, not even counting production, so maybe it's 32, 33, then I think it had a chance to keep the league together. So if you're reading the market correctly, and I understand the digital players, these major companies, Apple, Amazon, they pencil out everything. They want it to all make sense and to make money. And if you want to be in the sports game, though, it can't always make sense. And maybe they don't really want to be fully in the sports game. They only want to be in where there's not much risk, which is what the offer they made. There wasn't much risk for Apple in terms of doing this deal. It would be a couple $100 million guaranteed. And then from there, the Pac-12 universities would try to have to figure out if it was successful, it'd work out for both of them. It makes sense. It's practical. It's very smart in that regard. But if you want to be in sports, you can't always be fully practical to get in. And Apple so far has not shown that, first Sunday ticket, now this deal, they just don't seem to be all in yet.
Andrew, you hit on one of the most important parts of that Apple deal too. And it happened with the MLS Apple deal. The Pac-12 deal was 20 to 25 million per school, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what about the production costs? Each school was going to have to produce their own football games, their own basketball games, their own Olympic sports games. So all of a sudden, that number, 20 to 25, that's the gross number. What's the net number there? Yeah. I've heard different things about in order to do production, it's what, 5 to 10 million per school,
I think I was conservative and said 2.5 to 5 million because but let's just, we don't know the exact number. It's millions of dollars. So it's millions of dollars, and that is an impact from that number. So you're really even further away from the Big 12 31.7 per school number.
In the Pac-12's defense, that's how Apple does their deals. That's the deal that they have with MLS. I know a ton of people that have negotiated with Apple. This is part of what they do. And there's a gross number that's out there that looks good and feels good. But underlying it are these added costs, like the production costs, especially, that really bring that down significantly.
All right, now let's go what's next and what it means for the overall market. And college football is going to have their playoff expanded. I think they think they're getting $1 billion. From what I'm told, they're not getting $1 billion, at least from the networks. Look, I do think if I'm Amazon, that's one I'm looking at closely. I'm just because I do think it fits into what they like to do, because those are singular games and impactful, right? Like, again, maybe not as impactful as they could be, but they kind of have the infrastructure now, the production they get from NBC for Thursday Night Football predominantly. So they'd have to figure that part out, but maybe there's a partnership that they could do with somebody. And I do think that's a way for Amazon to possibly get in there. But ESPN and Fox are obviously the favorites. A lot of people think like now those two really can make it so they have such leverage in the college game. A lot of people think that, Fox and ESPN are the favorite, and then maybe they are, but it's going to be pure money at the end of the day, I think. So Amazon could have a chance. But the overall point that I'm trying to make is that I don't think they're going to get as much money as maybe they anticipated. I think it's kind of a similar situation that what just happened to the Pac-12. It's not going to be as extreme. There's definitely going to be bidders, maybe a lot of bidders. I just don't think anybody's going to go crazy for these extra playoff games because of where the market is.
Our job over the next 2 years or 3 years, however long, is to figure out what properties are nice to have, like the Pac-12, like the MLS, like all of the properties that did Apple deals couldn't sign TV deals. And what's must-have programming? The NFL's must-have programming. I would suggest that the CFP championship is must-have programming. Maybe I think the semis is must-have programming. But once you go down to sort of the early rounds, this isn't like the men's basketball tournament or the women's basketball tournament where you see great upsets in round one. You're not seeing, Boise State upset Alabama in the first round of the college football playoff. And I think that plays into it as well. But there are these overarching trends, and the TV companies, the media companies, are going to pay for the rights that they deem to be important rights. But the nice to have networks, that line is an ever-changing line. And seeing what happened to the Pac-12 with the great big brands that they have in the Pac-12 has been really eye-opening to me.
Yes, those early rounds aren't going to do as well. I do think you could have some upsets. And you always use Alabama as the example, but they're always like a 4 seed that maybe could play Boise State and lose. I mean, yes, Alabama and Georgia probably.
What was the final score of last year? There was a TCU and Georgia.
I know, but I'm just saying. I'm not saying every year, but there could be some excitement. I think you're downplaying a little bit the chance of an upset, or at least a competitive game. But I agree. But here's the overall point: is that I think they might get less money than they anticipated.
We agree on that. Yeah,
that is something that they're going to have to figure out to do the best deal possible. And that's where, like, a digital player. The other thing is, if you're Amazon, once you have the NFL. Like, if the idea is just to add Prime members and, Amazon owns a night. Like, to me, that was a brilliant deal. Now, does it all, again, pencil out fully, perfectly? Probably not, in my opinion, but I don't know all the numbers. But they own Thursday nights for 15 weeks of the year. That's not bad for a digital company when you're trying to grow in this space. And let's move to the NBA TV rights. I think Amazon, from what I've heard and even off of what we've seen, I think has clearly moved ahead of Apple in terms of potentially getting a night on with the NBA and some playoffs as well. They seem to have the infrastructure. They seem to have the plan that fits into more what the NBA wants to do. I think the NBA would love to be in business with Apple, like anybody. Apple's Apple. Like, I've gotten on them a little bit for their sports plan, but they're one of the great companies of all time, and they still are. But so I think the NBA would like to be in business with them. I just don't know if it really fits into what they're doing. Eddie Q said recently that one of the top Apple executives who oversees sports, that they really want to do these all-encompassing deals, and I don't think that's available with the NBA, at least not at this point. So I don't know. I think Amazon's moved past the Apple. If I was laying favorites. Again, not a done deal, not reporting anything. So I don't want it to just make it clear, but in terms of where it stands at the moment.
Yeah, when we talk about must-have programming and nice-to-have programming, the NBA is set up as must-have programming, and where the NBA is going to greatly benefit is we can identify multiple bidders, at least more than one bidder for the number of packages that they're going to have. We know that Bob Iger, Jimmy Pitaro, and ESPN are desperate to keep the NBA rights, and they want to keep the finals as well. And
I wouldn't say desperate. I just think there's a feeling that they're going to keep them. You think they're desperate for it? I mean, they have a lot of programs.
You know what? I my editor would have taken out desperate, and I wouldn't have allowed that in.
Well,
Talking is hard, Andrew.
I think they want them.
Yeah,
I think they want them.
They want them,
and I think there's a great relationship there. I think that Iger. I think it might have happened regardless, but I think it'll be even easier because the relationship with Iger and the NBA and Silver. And they got rid of Van Gundy. Just kidding. I know that was nothing to do with the NBA. I got it. But I think that relationship's very strong and both sides are very happy. And yes, it'll be an increase, less games, less regular season games, potentially. And that's where Amazon comes in to kick in. So they do get that increase, a slight increase. But I don't think it's going to be the crazy numbers that have sometimes been reported. Again, they're going to do really well. It's going to be a huge number. It's going to be maybe a doubles, but it's not tripling. I know that's been out there before. It's not happening.
Yeah, and we know that Turner wants to keep its package. We know that NBC is extremely interested in getting its package. We know that Amazon is interested in getting a package. Apple is always a big question mark, but everything has suggested that they're going to more than kick the tires on this as well. So you have more bidders than packages. So when we talk about the overlying trends in the media business, I don't see that affecting the NBA nearly as much as like the Pac-12 or MLS for that matter.
And before we move to Kevin Brown and the Orioles,
yeah, come on, I'm dying for Kevin Brown and the Orioles.
Embarrassment of your franchise. The one thing I will say, and we talked about this last week, and I get it. Apple's always mentioned, like, if CBS goes up for sale, if Fox goes up for sale, Apple, because they have so much money, but they never really seem to buy everything. But I do think that relationship with ESPN, if their plan is to sell subscriptions, they want to be the hub. It seems to me to make so much sense to do a deal with ESPN, and you'll be able to sell subscription and make it the de facto cable in the future goes through Apple. Like, how do you get your sporting events goes through Apple? Maybe there's a deal with Amazon too. I mean, that's possible for ESPN. I just think if you were to add up and how long it would take for Apple to get the rights that they want to do to put their plan in place, and maybe they're just going to wait everyone out for 10 years, maybe that will work. They could do it in a year from now or 2 years from now when ESPN goes direct to consumer in partnership with them, where they make it that they're selling subscriptions, they're not doing the production. To me, that makes total sense. They be in almost every sport there is. And that makes a lot more sense than trying to pick up rights as we go along here.
That's key is direct to consumer. The only hesitancy I have with agreeing with you full stop on that is that look, cable TV channel is Apple's a forward-looking company. It has no interest.
No, I'm not saying that. Not to do cable TV is to sell direct to consumer and to become the worldwide leader. Sorry, Chris LaPoca, head of PR, but for ESPN.
When did they stop saying that?
There you go. He stopped saying it. He said it once, but I wasn't even going to say ESPN. I was going to say Apple could become the worldwide leader in sports, worldwide, with using ESPN as the linchpin, and then as everything develops over, and streaming is going to become very important. I mean, it might have taken a speed bump here. This is the future. It still is, and it's going to be. But if you start in with ESPN 10 years from now, does everyone need to sell through Apple? I mean, that's kind of Apple's. That's what they've done historically in all these other genres, from music to video, and so. That seems to me, and then you take your 10, 15% cut or 30% cut, whatever it is.
Leagues, be careful. I mean, people that go into bed with Apple, like the music and everything, like that's tough.
100%. Well, that's the other thing. You have to have your eyes wide open.
Yeah.
All right, John, we're doing only 3 topics today, but we have to get to this one. Is Kevin Brown, Orioles TV play-by-player. It was my who's down. You're my who's down, John. All you do is talk. Adley Rushman, Orioles every week. We're a sports media podcast. You have to hear about the Orioles. Now, finally, it actually is a sports media podcast talking about the Orioles. As Gary Cohen said, as Michael Kay said, as Dave O'Brien said, Jason Benetti doing the White Sox took a shot. An utter embarrassment for the Orioles. Please explain your franchise.
Let me take the team perspective on this.
Please.
First of all, you know what I think of Kevin Brown. He's been the call of the week more times than any other announcer, I believe, in
Love Kevin Brown.
Podcast history. 33 years old. I think the best young play-by-player in baseball right now. I think he's really, really good.
Is Benetti young?
He's older than Kevin Brown.
He's older. Is Joe Davis young?
Oh, Joe Davis.
Is Adam Amin young?
Oh, all right.
I just want you to define young. I mean, you're throwing out these. This is a worldwide podcast. You're throwing out this crowd. I mean, I think Kevin Brown's very good. I just want to know. I'm
team Kevin Brown. It sounds like
I
Joe.
I know who's young. All right, fine. Go ahead.
Kevin Brown, by the way, when he does home run calls, he has his home run.
Excellent. He sounds like Joe Buck. He
has his home run call, and then he does like 2 more home run calls after that I think just pop into his head. It's great. It adds to the excitement. All right, so the Orioles' perspective, he was not suspended. Nobody ever said that he was suspended. Nobody told him he was suspended. The RSN business is rapidly changing, and they just want to try new play. Stop laughing, Andrew. No, I'm trying to get through this.
We like to be fair. If you're writing a story, we'd put their side of. And when I covered A-Rod during Biogenesis and MLB, we covered, Wally Matthews and I covered, the A-Rod side of it, even though it was ludicrous, his side. But we covered it and we put it in the stories. Then MLB may have gotten mad at us, but back then. So the point is that we have to give their side of it, even if it's ludicrous, and even though it's ludicrous. But go ahead.
The RSN business is totally changing. They're an independent RSN, and they are trying desperately to just make changes and see what works. And so they had a couple of series that came on, and they brought in some other play-by-play people to as part of the rotation. Under contract, Kevin Brown has, I think, 120, 130 games a season. So there is plenty of opportunity for the team to just put in some other people to try them out and let see what happens.
That makes sense. Okay, well, let's move on then. I mean, that's good. The Orioles explained it. Now it's all good. I think it's fine then. You're right. That I was dying to tweet out that the Orioles, I think, had a point. There's no point, right? Like, even what they're saying it's just ridiculous. Look, Kevin Brown has.
Actually, you did this as a who's down. So I'm actually a little bit emotional about this because I have watched this team almost every game this season. Kevin Brown is somehow Masson lucked into an elite play-by-play announcer, and he's been fun, and he's brought the excitement. He has a great rapport with Jim Palmer, Hall of Famer from the Orioles. Ben McDonald, Ben McDonald mentions LSU a little too often on the telecast, but a great rapport with the analysts in there, and he calls a really good game, and you can tell by the number of posts on social media, my Twitter feed in particular. Oriole fans really have taken to Kevin Brown, and so the idea of let's try. This isn't spring training. Let's try out new announcers. You don't do that when you're playing the Yankees and you're in first place after several seasons of losing 115 games, 112 games, 110 games. Like, we're finally here, and it's been a lot of fun. To me, it suggests that Masson it needs somebody with steeped in TV experience that would just kind of say, like, yeah, we don't do this right now. We have the voice, and let's use that voice as long as we can.
When a story is not your story, the job is also to still find out what's true, what's not true, to make your calls afterward. And Awful Announcing did most of the reporting after Matt Jurgensen, and what they reported was all correct. So, that's the issue for Masson and the Orioles. The story is correct. I mean, were the word suspended used? As far as I know, I don't think so. So, they take a little license there, perhaps, but he was kept off the air. He would have been doing those games. They had a problem with the innocuous statements about how they had lost. It's a statement of fact. Like, that's what you want. Like, the other thing is for Kevin Brown. Now, I think this is going to be great for his career. He's going to have to decide if he wants to stay there. But
Kevin, stay.
Yeah,
Kevin.
I mean, I think he has some roots in there. I think
bought a house in Baltimore, apparently. So.
Yeah, apparently he bought it. Yeah, so there's a good chance he could stay, but it does hurt your credibility. in terms of your broadcast. So he's going to have to decide that. But it's been great for his career. You got Gary Cohen, who's about as respected as they come as a play-by-player, with who does the Mets, saying that all 29 other teams would want Kevin Brown. I don't know if Gary's giving up his job, but he is very good. So this is going to be good for Kevin Brown in the long run because his name's gotten bigger. He didn't do anything wrong, but it's a difficult situation for anybody. Like, who wants to be in the middle of this? And he didn't even do anything wrong. And, people just read like suspended. And even like on that CNN clip that you tweeted out, one of the anchors said, well, is there more to the story? And like, that's difficult because, you always kind of think there got to be more to the story. It's so stupid, but there is no more to the story. There's no behind the scenes, something happened. There's nothing there, but that he does have to deal with that a little bit. Long run, it's better for him. And hopefully these teams understand that. And even if he was slightly critical, it's better. As Tim McCarver said years and years ago, there's no praise without criticism. If you just praise everything and say this is always great and you just have your agenda and you always talk about one thing and always say it's good and never say any part of it is bad, you lose credibility. And it's also and so, hopefully the Orioles maybe learn something from it. My read is John Angelos lives in his own world and is like looks at that as criticism because, I don't know if he's a billionaire or what he is, but he owns a baseball team, so he has a lot of money. And so it's just not in reality. And so for Kevin Brown, he'll be okay. Supposedly he's going to be back on the air, this weekend. They have a long road trip. So if he's not there, then I don't know when he's going to be back. But this isn't tryout season. I mean, that's the stupidest thing ever, especially when you have somebody who's really good. It's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. There's really again, look at the other side. There is no other side.
Let me, I just want to say one more thing on this topic. And it's Oriole fans, longtime Oriole fans are really suffering from PTSD almost with this because one of the greatest baseball broadcasters of all time, John Miller, used to handle our radio broadcasts, the team's radio broadcasts. He used to be on Orioles telecasts. And in the mid-1990s, Peter Angelos, the then owner, didn't like that he was doing as many ESPN games as he was doing. And he didn't necessarily fire him, but certainly sort of ushered John Miller out, which took away, like, that's the way, that was the voice. There was a connection that fans had to John Miller, and he would do like his Vin Scully imitations, and he was utterly a fantastic way to follow the game. And then it just got taken away from the fan base, and they're seeing that sort of play out again. And so it's just kind of these deep emotions that go back, 2 decades, for goodness sakes.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us, John. We hit on a lot of stuff. We want to thank our the master of the board, Chris Mason, also AC Wyatt, who oversees everything. And then next week, John, 100th show. We've done this 99 times. We're moving to triple figures next week. If you like it, if you make a comment, if you rate it the 5 stars, it really helps us get 100 more shows. But it's 99's in the books.
They never said it would last, Andrew. They never did. We beat back everybody on this.
Well, the one thing people need to know, to have a podcast, all you need is to have a pulse. So it's not exactly a high bar to have a podcast.
Our very first podcast, I think that's what Scott Van Pelt, our very first Big Get said. He was like, look, see, anybody can do a podcast.
Exactly. That is true. We're proving it every week, but we do appreciate you listening, especially if you're listening at this point, because that means you listen to the whole thing. And so we'll be back next week, and thanks for everything.
Thanks for listening.